Be'ezrat Hashem, with God's help, we begin today Hilchos Shofar v'Sukkah v'Lulav. The laws of the Shofar, the Sukkah, and the Lulav. They come together because they're all related to the month of Tishrei. We already had the laws of Yom Kippur, Shvisas Aser, resting on the tent, but that was considered separate because it was mainly don'ts. Rest from work, rest from eating. So the Rambam put it together with the other laws of resting on Shabbos, resting on Yom Tov. Today we're talking about the do's, the positive commandments related to the mitzvah, to the holidays. So we group together Shofar, V'Sukkah, V'Lulav, and it goes in that order because Shofar comes first on Rosh Hashanah, and then on Sukkot, which is actually the day we're on today, the last day of Sukkot, Hoshana Rabbah, we do Sukkah and Lulav. And which one comes first? Sukkah comes before Lulav, because you sit in the Sukkah at night and you only shake the Lulav in the morning. Especially this year when Sukkot began on Shabbat, we didn't even do the Lulav till the second day. So the whole first day we only had the Sukkah. That's why the Rambam goes in that order. Shofar, Sukkah, Lulav. And my brother told me that today's Hoshana Rabbah, and some people actually blow the Shofar today. Rosh Hashanah and Hoshana Rabbah are very much linked. Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the inscription for the new year, and Hoshana Rabbah is called the Pit Katava, the kvittel, the notes go out. God gives the final verdict. Huh?
Who does it?
Oh, some Ashkenazi communities. But nevertheless, we're learning about the shofar today. So the Rambam begins, as he always does, by telling us which mitzvahs we're going to discuss in these laws. Yesh bichlalan shalish mitzvahs aseh. In the next 8 chapters, we're going to be covering 3 positive mitzvahs. V'zehu pratan, their details are the following. Aleph, number 1, l'shmoya kol shofar be'echad b'tishrei. To hear the sound of the shofar on the first of Tishrei. It's a very exact, the wording, to hear. The mitzvah is not to blow the shofar. The mitzvah is to hear the sound of the shofar. Beis, leishev basukah kol shiva semei chag, to sit in the sukkah, all 7 days of the holiday. When you see in the Torah the word chag, plain, holiday, it means Sukkot. And Gimel, litel lulav bamikdash kol shiva semei chag. The mitzvah in the Torah is to take the lulav only in the temple for all the 7 days of Sukkot. Today we do lulav all 7 days in the shul to remember the times of the Holy Temple. But really the mitzvah is to take it in the Bet HaMikdash. Ubir mitzvah seilu b'prakim elu, the explanation of these mitzvahs comes in the following 8 chapters. And Baruch Hashem, today we had a long morning prayer, so the Rambam gives us a short chapter today. Perek Rishon, chapter 1. Halacha Aleph. Mitzvah saseh shel Torah, it is a positive commandment in the Torah, a biblical positive commandment, lishmoya truas hashofar b'reish Hashanah, to hear the sound, the toot of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Shenamar, as it says, and you can see it on the screen, this is the verse that describes the korbanot, the special sacrifices that was brought on Rosh Hashanah, and it says, Yom Teruah yiyeh lachem. It's a day of Teruah, a day of blowing a horn. How do we know you blow it with a shofar? We'll soon see. But that's what it says, a day of blowing, a day of sounding. The shofar shetaken by the shofar which we used to blow, bein b'reish Hashanah, bein b'yovel, whether on the new year, Rosh Hashanah. Whether on Yovel, Yovel is more the lesser known time. Every 50th year, the Jubilee year, they would blow the shofar on the end of Yom Kippur to signify the Yovel year. And it had the same mitzvahs as Rosh Hashanah. So the shofar that we use, hu keren hakvasim, or hakeves hakafuf. It is the horn of a ram, which is bent. The chala shofar is psulin chutz mi keren hakeves. According to the Rambam, the halacha is all other shofars, all other horns are disqualified, besides for a ram's sheep's horn. There are other customs that use these longer kudu horns. According to the Rambam, it's disqualified. Only a ram's horn. Even though in the Torah, it doesn't say to blow with a shofar. It says Yom Teruah, day of blowing. How do we know it's with the shofar? By the Yovel year, where it talks about the shofar, look what it says. Twice in the same verse. It says the word shofar, and next to the word shofar, what does it say? Teruah, the same word as Rosh Hashanah. So from here we learn, we learn from tradition, ma truas yovel b'shofar, af truas Rosh Hashanah b'shofar. The same way the sounding of the horn on the Yovel is done with a shofar, so to Rosh Hashanah is done with a shofar. Beis b'mikdash hayu toikin b'reish Hashanah. In the Holy Temple, they used to blow on Rosh Hashanah in a very special way. B'shofar echad u'shtei chatzotzres min hatzdadin. With one shofar, a ram's horn, plus 2 trumpets from the sides. This is supposed to be an imaginary picture of how it looked. The Kohanim would stand, one guy with the shofar in the middle, 2 guys with the trumpets on the sides. Ha-shofar ma'arich v'ha-chatzotzres mekatzres. The shofar would make a long sound, and the trumpets would make short sounds. Shemitzvahs hayom b'shofar. Because that way everybody would understand that the mitzvah of the day is the shofar. Chatzotzrot, the trumpets were blown all the time in the Holy Temple. every Shabbat, every holiday. Here they blew the shofar extra long to know that today is the shofar day. So why blow the trumpets at all? Today is a shofar day, blow the shofar. Mishum shenamar, because it says in Tehillim, b'chatzotzros v'koil shofar, with trumpets and the sound of the shofar, hariyu lifnei hamelech Hashem. You should make sounds before the King Hashem. In other words, when you're in Hashem's presence in the Bet HaMikdash, you use both the trumpets and the horn. Aval b'shar mekaymes, but anywhere else in the diaspora or even in Israel, ein toikin b'reish Hashana la b'shofar bilvad. On Rosh Hashanah we only blow with the shofar, no other accompanying instruments. Gimel, shofar shel akum, or goy, a shofar that belongs to an idol-worshipping Gentile. Ein toikin by lechatchila, we do not use it initially to blow the shofar with. V'im toka yatsa, but if you used it, it's okay, you fulfilled your obligation. V'shel ir hanidachas, but if it belongs to the convinced city. Remember in the first book, if the entire city gets convinced to serve idols, everybody has to be burned and killed. So the whole city is considered to be asur b'hana'ah, forbidden to have pleasure from. Supposed to burn the shofar down. Im taka by lo yatsa. So if you use the shofar to blow on Rosh Hashanah, you don't fulfill your obligation. Why? Because the Talmud says anything which is meant to be burnt is as if it doesn't exist. And the shofar needs to be a certain size. We're going to soon see. So if it doesn't exist, there's no size. So you can't use it. Shofar hagazel, shatakabai. A stolen shofar. You need to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, you go to your neighbor's house, you steal the shofar. Yatsa. You have fulfilled your obligation. Yes. Why? She'ein ha-mitzvah ela bishmiya sakoil. Because the mitzvah is only to hear the sound. You can steal a shofar, but you can't steal a sound.
No, you didn't steal it. You take it without permission. You give it back, I bet.
Doesn't matter.
Like the only mitzvah that you could do, because no, almost all of them say.
Almost all of them you can't. Lulav you can't. Shofar you could. Afal pisha loy naga bay v'lehigbiya hashemeya yatsa. The truth is that even if the guy listening didn't even touch the shofar, you can blow shofar for me, and I'll fulfill my obligation without even touching it, without even picking it up, because the mitzvah is only the sound. Ve'ein bekoil din gezel. Sound can't be stolen. So if you used the stolen shofar to produce a kosher sound, it's okay. V'chein shofar shel oila, also a shofar belonging to a korban, a sacrifice, a burnt offering. Lo yiskabay. Initially you shouldn't use it to blow. V'im taka yatsa. But if you did blow it, you are fulfilling your obligation. She'ein bekoil din me'ila, because sound is not subject to the laws of me'ila. Me'ila means sacrilege, using or misusing hekdesh, things that are holy. So here you misused the ram's horn to blow the shofar, but at the end of the day, what did you use? You used only the sound. The sound can't really be used. So you fulfill your obligation. If you might say, when I listen to the sound, I enjoy the sound. So maybe the enjoyment is what I'm stealing or what I'm misusing. Mitzvahs lav lehanes nitnu. The Rambam says a very core rule. Mitzvahs are not here to give us pleasure. We don't. Even if you do experience pleasure in a mitzvah, that's not the target idea.
Rambam was the Lubavitcher.
The Lubavitchers love doing mitzvahs. We have pleasure, but the mitzvahs weren't given for pleasure. We should definitely enjoy them, but that's not what they're there for. Their initial purpose isn't that, and therefore, it's okay. Lefichach, therefore, here's another law that comes out of this. Hamudar hanaya mishofar. If somebody makes a vow and he says, you know what, I'm never going to enjoy a shofar. Mutar litkaya be'litkiyah shel mitzvah. He can use the shofar to blow on Rosh Hashanah, the mitzvah blow, because the mitzvah blow isn't for enjoyment. You made a vow not to enjoy the shofar. It's not enjoying. Dalit. Shofar shel Rosh Hashanah, the shofar to be used on Rosh Hashanah, ein mechalelin olav es yom tov. You cannot desecrate holiday to get to it. Va'afilu b'davar shu mishum shvus, even if it's only a rabbinic enactment that you're going to violate. Ketzah, what does that look like? Hoya hashofar b'reish ha'ilam. You have a shofar stuck in the tree. Oime ever hanar, or over the river. Ve'ein le shofar elahu, and you only have, that's the only shofar you have. Ein le be'ilan, ve'ein le shat al pnei hamayim kedei lahaviyah. You're not allowed to climb the tree. You cannot swim across the river to bring it. Ve'ein tzarich loymar, she'ein chayschen oisai, ve'ein oisin by malacha. Certainly, we're not even talking about, actually trimming. They call it trimming, not cutting. Trimming the horn from the ram. That you certainly cannot do on holiday or do any work, because the blowing of the shofar is only a positive commandment. The Yom Tov asay v'lo asay, whereas the laws of working on holiday is governed by both positive and negative commandments. Rest on Rosh Hashanah, don't work on Rosh Hashanah. We have a principle: if it's one positive commandment versus a positive and a negative, the positive cannot push over the positive and the negative. However, mutar liten b'soichei mayim or yayin or chaymetz b'yom tov. You can pour through your shofar some water or some wine or some vinegar on the holiday, to polish it so the sound will come out better. Never put urine inside. Apparently urine was a good material to smooth out the shofar, but you cannot use it. Covered out of dignity, out of respect. Mitzvahs shouldn't be viewed in an embarrassing, degrading way. Hey, shiur hashofar. The size of the shofar has to be big enough for you to hold it in your hand, and it can be seen on both sides. This is a longer shofar. But let's say the shofar was just this short. Okay, it ended over here. That would be enough because it sticks out on this side and on that side, and that's fine. Nisdak le'arkoi, if a shofar got a crack along its length, that's the right side over there. So the crack is going this way, so puzzle. That's immediately disqualified. L'rachboi, but if it goes widthwise over here, so if you think about it, if a crack goes widthwise, all we're basically saying is that the shofar doesn't count from here, but it counts from here. So as long as from here and on it's big enough, im nishtayer, boy kashior, if there's left over the proper amount of the shofar, kasher, then it's kosher. Okay, ilu nichras mekayim hasedek, we just treat it as though the place of the crack was cut off. But if it's a lengthwise crack, you can't do that because the whole, wherever the length crack goes, is considered to be cut off.
It's easy to fix it with heat. Can you do that when you fix it?
Can you fix it with heat? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it comes together again? Yeah. Nikav, if a shofar got a hole. Okay, this is all cracks. Now what about a hole? That's actually a shofar with a hole right there. Im stamay shalei b'minay pasul. If you stuff the hole with something which is not shofar material, you put it with a cloth, a piece of cotton or something, pasul, then it's disqualified. Because what happens is, when you blow through the shofar, part of the sound is coming based on the part that's not shofar. Stamay b'minay, if you stuffed it with a piece of shofar, im nishtayer ruba shalim, if most of the shofar remains complete, v'loy ikvu hanekavim shenistimu esatkia, and the holes don't interrupt, don't disturb the blowing, hareza kosher, then your blowing shofar is kosher. Kedachay bezachrusay. Okay, I couldn't find a picture for this, but if you actually watch how shofars are made, the horn comes off the animal, and it's actually stuffed with cartilage. Mm-hmm. So they have to dig it out, and this part of the horn is the natural hard part of the horn. The rest is soft cartilage. You dig it out, and you get a shofar. So what happens if you didn't have the time or the patience to dig out all the cartilage? You simply drilled a hole through the cartilage all the way to the edge of the shofar. So you have a hole going through, but it's not pure shofar. It's also cartilage. Kedachay bezachrusay means you drilled it in its core, in its cartilage. Kosher, it's kosher. Shemin b'minay einay chaytzei. Because even though there's something over the shofar interrupting, but it's the same type. It is the shofar. So it's not considered to be an interruption.
Isn't it cartilage when it get old, get just mitporer levad?
Not necessarily. If it's tough, you have to boil it out. Dibek shivrei shofros ad shehishlim le'echad. What if you have a bunch of cracked shofars and you made a puzzle out of them? Okay, you put them all together and you made yourself a new shofar. Puzzle. That's disqualified because it's different shofars. You have to have only one shofar, not 2 or 3 shofars. Vav hoisif alav kol shehu. If I add it to the shofar, I thought it was too short. I want a bigger shofar, so I add something to the shofar. Bein b'minay, bein shalei b'minay pasul. Whether it's the same type, an actual shofar, or it's just some cardboard or some metal, not kosher. Tzipo zav mi bifnim ay b'mkeim anachas apeh pasul. If I painted it gold on the inside, so that I'm actually blowing through the gold, or where I put my mouth, it's disqualified. But if I painted it gold from the outside, if that changes the sound the way it used to sound, now it's different, disqualified. But if nothing changes, it's kosher, because when you blow, you're actually blowing just the shofar, and the sound is coming through the shofar. Nasan shofar b'soich shofar. If you had a shofar big enough to put another shofar inside it. Im kol pnimi shama. If when you blow, you're hearing the sound emitted by the inner shofar, yatsa, you have fulfilled your obligation, because that's the shofar that you're blowing into, and then there's nothing interrupting it. But if you also heard the sound of the outer shofar, lo yatsa, you have not fulfilled your obligation because it's also being influenced by the inner shofar that's sitting inside it. Not sure why a person would do this, but let's say you used hot water or heat. This is the natural point of connection to the animal, and this is the edge of it, right? What if you used heat to close up this side and widen that side? So now you're blowing the shofar the opposite way. Puzzle, that's disqualified. Zayin, hoya aroich v'kitzroi kosher. If it was a long shofar and you shortened it, it's okay. Gerdoi, if you scraped it down. Again, this is the natural shofar as it is. What if you scraped down? You made it extremely thin. on the ben mi bifnim, ben mi bachutz, whether on the inside or on the outside. Afilu ha'amidoi al gildoi, even if you did so to the extent that you just have one thin layer left, kosher, it's kosher, because it's still the same shofar. Hoya kele of oidak oitzarud kosher. If the voice, the sound produced by the shofar was thick, or too thin, high-pitched, or dry, still kosher. Shekala kolis ksherin b'shofar, all sounds are kosher as long as it's the natural sound of the shofar, it's kosher. Somebody's blowing shofar inside of a pit or inside of a cave. Anybody standing with him in the pit or in the cave fulfilled their obligation because they're for sure hearing the sound of the shofar. But somebody standing on the outside of the pit, if they're sure that they heard the sound of the shofar, they're fulfilling their obligation. But if all they heard was the echo, because when the sound of the shofar bounces off the pits or the cave's walls, it makes an echo, that's not hearing the sound of the shofar. Therefore they have not fulfilled their obligation. But the same laws apply if somebody blows into a massive pitcher, which has a massive echo. If you're sure that you heard the sound of the shofar, you fulfill your obligation. But if you only heard the sound of the echo, you have not fulfilled your obligation. The mitzvah is to hear the sound of the shofar and not anything else. And that is the end of the first chapter of the laws of shofar.